Yes, welcome to Hull, and we're in the beautiful City Hall, in the centre of a city which, for the most part, has been waiting for this day to come. Hull voted overwhelmingly to leave the EU. More than 67% of voters said they wanted out. Tonight we're joined by an audience of business people, students and some of the city's migrant population, some celebrating but some much more anxious about today. And we're going to ask what happens now. First, in a city which voted for Brexit, will Brexit now deliver for the city and beyond? Over centuries, the Humber estuary transformed Hull into one of the UK's most important and prosperous port cities. But the post-war years were less than kind. The fishing industry experienced near-terminal decline, and the city was hit hard by austerity. Today, it's the UK capital of culture, an idea borrowed, of course, from Europe. But European ideas are not the only import to Hull. According to one pro-EU group, up to £40 million a year flows in from Brussels' coffers. That money didn't stop many here feeling left behind. The referendum seen as an opportunity to kick back against not just Brussels, but Westminster too. So what will Brexit mean for the so-called gateway to Europe? How ready are Hull's people for the changes which lie ahead? So to help me answer that question, I'm joined by this audience from people across the city. Steve Arnott, you're a warehouse worker. You voted out. This is your day, isn't it? How do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I feel hopeful, you know, that what the future brings will be good for us. And, you know, I feel a bit apprehensive because everything's a little bit vague at the moment. I don't really...
Is it more vague than you anticipated?
Yeah, definitely a lot more vague than I anticipated. But yeah, I feel hopeful that in the future it'll be good for us and it'll be good for my children and my children's children as well. So,
Deanna Davison, a student, you also voted out. Any regrets, any wobbles today?
Not at all. I'm excited, and as Steve said, I'm also hopeful. I think in years to come people will look back on today as the day that Britain again took a step onto the global stage and again started to become a great power.
So nothing but positive thoughts today?
Yes.
Faye Marsden, do you share that positivity? You're a care leaver who now helps young people find work with the help of EU funding.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, I don't share the optimism. I'm quite apprehensive as I work for a youth project called The Warren, and we receive money from the European Social Fund to address the skills gap in our own labour market, and it's part of 6.6 million given to the city from the European Social Fund. So I don't know where that's going to come from
so
in the
worrying
future.
for you today?
Yes, certainly.
Sean McAllister, is it a day you wished had never come? Are you sanguine about it now?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it's a very great moment in Hull to have City of Culture and to have the world looking at us finally. But at this time, to be making this decision is insane. To be signing a blank contract and then discussing the terms 2 years later, why don't we do it the other way around when we know what we're signing for?
Do you still harbour hopes that this won't happen?
Well, I kind of harbour hopes that in 2 years' time or 10 years' time or whenever we get round to getting to the results, maybe 20 years' time, we get round to going back to the people saying, do you really want to do this?
Second referendum?
Absolutely.
What does everyone else make of that? A couple of thoughts from the audience, please.
Well, when it comes to a second referendum, I'm absolutely certain that if the British people had voted to remain last June, we wouldn't have been saying, oh, in a couple of years' time, do you want to have another try again? You know, the people voted to leave, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We've got to respect that decision. It's just a red herring, this second referendum.
They were hoodwinked by the media, the right-wing media.
Oh, rubbish. Absolute rubbish.
All right.
This was a second referendum. I voted in the first referendum. So what we're looking at is a third referendum, potentially.
What I want to talk about, though, Steve mentioned just there that things are a bit more vague than he'd anticipated. Now, of course, there's a lot of talk about this bill. Up to 60 billion euros they're talking about a bill before we can leave. Who among those people who voted leave anticipated this? Bill Pulverman.
Well, I anticipated them trying to impose costs on us. I mean, this is the way the EU has behaved for all the entire 40-something period of our membership. I certainly don't think we should be paying any money to them after we leave. I think that would be foolishness.
So you used to be UKIP branch secretary in Hull, is that right?
Yes, that's correct,
and
at the time of the referendum.
You think we should just say, no, we're not paying and walk away?
Ultimately, there is nothing to negotiate. Having free trade with Europe is mutually advantageous. And those people, they're talking about the billions in payments, those are ultimately two people who were EU employees. there's no reason to pay them.
In the run-up, though, did anyone here talk of this €1 billion bill? Was that one of the things that perhaps wasn't very clear?
Mentioned it. It was not mentioned by Leave or Remain because it was never.
And what do you feel about that?
It's not. I don't think we will pay. To be honest, I don't see how they could make us pay a leaving fee. It's something that, you know, we don't owe them any money. We pay into it on a daily basis. So we're paid for services rendered. We don't owe them money.
Is it just got to be about money, Jackie? I mean, there are ideals here about peace and cooperation, which have kept the peace in Europe for 60 or more years, and we've just kicked those ideals in the teeth and said to the rest of Europe, we're not bothered. You know, we're going to go off on our own. We don't care what happens to you. You know, if I was a European, I would wonder what on earth is going on this island.
Well, we had peace in Europe before we joined the EU in 1972.
We had it before. The EU's kept that peace for 60 years.
The UN's kept
NATO is
Don't conflate
pivotal in that.
Lord Haskins, they call Hull the gateway to Europe. This city has just said a pretty strong no to the European Union. Can it survive outside? Clearly people think it can.
Well, it can. I mean, I think it is a disaster, but disasters are there to be dealt with. And a lot of things have to be done with this economy. Hull will probably suffer more than the rest of the country because of it, because of its close links with Europe. It'll also suffer because we're very dependent on migrant labour in certain areas. Our hospitals here are losing people already quite seriously. But those issues can be dealt with if we can persuade people of Hull, young people of Hull, to tackle the skills problem and to get ready to do the jobs that will be ready, will be available.
So can it survive without migrant labour, do you think?
I don't think it will need to survive without migrant labour, because one of the things the government is already doing is recognising belatedly that we need migrant labour in the hospitals to keep them going.
Jeremy Wong, you know, you're a businessman here. I'll come to you in a second. Jeremy Wong, you're a businessman in the area. You know, the EU, you know, Hull needs migrant workers.
I think Hull's reached saturation point with migrant workers, to be perfectly honest. As the owner of one of the largest letting agents in the city, a third of my stock is with migrant workers.
So they help your business, don't they?
Well, yes, they do help my business, but again, at the end of the day, I can't be prejudiced about who I rent a house to.
Would you rather not rent to them?
I can't be prejudiced or racist about who I rent a house to.
But you think we've reached saturation point?
Absolutely.
Olga Yaruchi, you're a Romanian citizen. How do you feel about the idea that Hull has reached saturation point?
Oh, I'm absolutely worried about the Brexit because I don't know what we have to expect of the day of tomorrow because the lack of information of our rights of citizen of EU.
So are you worried that at some point
Absolutely.
you may be told to go home?
Yeah, absolutely. But home we finished our life and we begin here, the new one. The main reason why we came here is our daughter, because she is doing a professional tennis, and that's why we are here.
So you're sad, you're nervous, frightened?
Absolutely.
How do people feel about that? Gina?
Well, I don't want to see anybody leave, and I feel really terrible that we've spoken, and it feels racist. I don't know anybody that's made this decision based on anything other than border control.
But given that people across the country, immigration was a key factor in voting leave, that idea that we should have control of our borders, we should control immigration, what's wrong with that?
But how is that going to change? It's not really about that. Most of the people I know that voted leave based it purely on they're scared of brown people and people with accents. I don't know anybody that made a decision that wasn't about that.
Boys, gentlemen at the back, boys, forgive me. It's because I'm so old.
Yeah, I just kind of find quite sad that people that voted leave are being all tarred with the same brush as being racist and just hating foreigners. It's just stupid, really. There's plenty of reasons for leaving it, apart from immigration. There's sovereignty, there's trade deals, there's
I want to come on to that in a moment, but on that issue of immigration, lots of people did vote because of immigration. Is it right that we should have control of our own borders?
Yes.
Is Brexit going to deliver on what many people wanted, which wasn't just control, it was less immigration?
Jackie, before 2004, when the 8 acceded to the Union, Hull's population had been dropping for 50 years. I was the leader of the council then, and the government was telling me to demolish more than 5,000 houses because they thought our population would continue to drop and there'd be no demand for them. Our economy's been turned around by our membership of the EU, in this city particularly. Siemens, if they were making the decision to come here now, which has been a huge thing for Hull, probably would have gone to Denmark, frankly. They wouldn't come here because we're leaving the European Union.
What about people who voted leave and for whom immigration was an issue?
Just on that point there with Siemens, they obviously knew there was going to be a referendum, so if that was such a massive issue, why move? Why not wait till the referendum?
Even Cameron thought we'd stay.
You know, it's ridiculous.
Siemens in their risk report of the year before they constructed the whole site did not actually mention the possibility of Britain leaving the EU as a risk factor, which...
But on that issue of immigration, David Davis, the Minister for Brexit, has already said, he said this week, under post-Brexit, immigration could go up as well as down, dependent on what we needed. Now, is that what you voted for?
Yes. I mean, not to have an increase in absolute terms, but
he's talking about the possibility at some point of immigration going up.
A filtering process where people come into the country based on us having a skill shortage in that area, and not vast numbers of trades and lorry drivers and so on being displaced from their work.
Why not treat someone from Australia the same as someone from Austria? Why is it we should discriminate against people who are outside the EU?
But was it your understanding that immigration would go down? No. Or was it possible that it might go up?
It was my understanding that we would have a liberal, fair, generous immigration policy, but one that we've decided, one that we can say, actually, you know, we have
and you think
a vast...
will give you that?
Yeah, I do. And actually, I think we have a lot of people from a lot of countries outside and in the EU who come to work here because they want to work in the UK.
From over here, just wait if you would.
Okay, I think it's a real shame that some people here have voted leave on the basis of an immigration policy and an immigration law. And just to add what was said in the back in terms of being coloured as well, as you can tell, I think that we bring a lot to the table. It's not just unskilled labour that may lack in the UK. We have culture and different things that we can bring to the table, and that's something that I've learned in business school myself. So I know what I bring to the table when I enter different industries, and I think that's important to remember, that it's not just about labour, but it's about what we can bring, tea, coffee, different things from around the world. You need to remember that.
It's also one of the best things about university is the experience of the diversity, the different cultures, the different people. Is actually it's worrying that, you know, if anyone wanted to restrict that, it is a massive selling point of going to uni. You get to meet so many different types of people, and it just really adds to the experience that you get here.
So did you vote Remain?
I was a Remainer, yeah.
And are you nervous now about? Do you share Olga's fears, your friends' fears about what it means for integration? There's going to be some interesting sort of impacts on students, and it does worry me. I think it's one of those things. I think it's about time it's going. We need to move on with it, but we just got to get it right. You're shaking your head, sir. Tell me why.
If we've got immigrants here already who are working, then why will we let them leave? Why do we want them to leave this country? They're not going to, are they?
But you make us feel unwelcome when you say views like that. I'm a British citizen, but I don't see a future in England for the rest of my life. Because of this, I feel unwelcome here now.
Do you accept that
I think
this lady, Olga, they feel nervous because of...
Yeah, they can feel nervous, but I just don't think... I don't think they're going to need to. They're going to stay here.
What have we got to stay for, though?
Well, they've still got labour. You're going to come here to work. That's what you've just said you're going to be here for. We're not going to say in 2 years' time you've got to leave.
Actually, only 45% of EU nationals come here for work. The non-EU nationals that come here, 41% of them come to study. I'm a British citizen, as I've said, but I don't see a future here after Brexit if so many people voted on the basis of immigration when my parents migrated here. No, they didn't, from non-EU.
So from non-EU they came here, so what's the problem?
Because when you say immigration, you're looking at the world as a whole. You're not just tackling just Europe.
That immigration is a good thing from their point of view.
I mean, that was one of the stories, or one of the issues that was raised, that actually it's about a fair playing field for non-EU migrants. So you don't mind in principle, as someone who was the branch secretary of UKIP, you have no problem with immigration going through the roof as long as it's fair?
I would definitely have a problem with immigration going through the roof. What I would want to see is it targeted to particular skills and based on points.
You, sir.
The immigration, when we voted to leave, we voted to choose who we want to come. If we need people to come, then people will come. If we don't, then we don't need them, we don't want them.
And you,
too long migration, high migration has been blamed for the lack of housing, schools, hospital places. Then build more homes, build more schools. You know, our population is growing, so let's build more. You know, you said a third of your stock is, so build more houses so we can fill them, you know, with more people.
I mean, there is an issue, isn't there, about pressure on services?
We have 57,000 empty buildings in Hull. We're not full. We're not even nearly full. And it's just, it leaves a horrible taste in my mouth that this is even part of the discussion, that people can't come to our country.
I took part in debates all over the country, and this issue of immigration was always brought up, and I always said all the time, it's not to do about immigration for me.
It is.
Yes, but the fact is, well, nobody believes you either, Colin.
I do.
But 9 times and you've never been elected.
Well, here we go again.
Well, you've never been elected, Andrew.
Colin, so
I've won 9 elections in Hull. You've never been elected.
Yes, okay, blah, blah, blah.
But you've said that last year.
Very quickly.
The fact is, yes, immigration could go up, but I haven't got a problem with that. It's whatever the economy needs. And as far as people being welcome, students should be welcome to study here. I value that diversity, and I know a lot of leavers who value that diversity as well.
So if the impression was given that immigration would come down, it doesn't matter that actually that's not true.
Was Nigel Farage valuing diversity when he stood in front of that poster, that racist poster? Let's call this what it is. This is thinly veiled racism and nothing more.
I am head of campaigns for the Freedom Association. I am not a member of UKIP. I do not speak for
when you lie down with dogs, you get up with fleas, sir. You know, you associate with these people. This is thinly veiled racism and nothing more.
Sorry, one at a time. I actually can't hear you. What was your point, sir?
My point is that this entire campaign from UKIP and their ilk is nothing more than thinly veiled racism.
On what basis do you make that claim?
But that poster that your leader
excuse me,
stood
the country at large voted Leave. Are you saying the country at large is
Absolutely
racist?
not. No, I'm saying that these people who led the Leave campaign with their lies and thinly veiled racism are part of an anti-immigration racist view.
Very quickly from the two...
Can I just say, you asked at the beginning, you asked Steve if he thought his life would be better. I genuinely do not believe it will be better because of this. It will be worse.
We're going to talk about a little bit more about that after the break. On that for the moment, thank you very much. But join us after the break when we'll carry on the discussion here in Hull, asking, will being British mean something different post-Brexit? Join us in a moment. Welcome back to Hull, and I'm here with an audience of people from across the city to ask what happens now Brexit is actually underway. Now, I wanted to ask something about how people's lives will or won't change after Brexit. I spent some time in Grimsby with people working in the fish market. Most of them leavers. Most of them said they didn't feel materially their life would get any better, but they were still delighted they'd voted Leave, and it was about control, it was about power. How many people feel that that's what this was really about? Someone we haven't heard from, so why?
I'm just pleased that we're regaining sovereignty. It's, for too long, power's been resting in Brussels over so many areas of our lives, and I'm happy that it's finally coming back to us.
Does it matter whether your life does or doesn't improve? Is the key thing for you sovereignty?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I think my life will improve, but at this stage, it's still very early days, as we've heard from around the room. But I am pretty optimistic that going forward, we'll be okay.
Ali, you work in Hull, you run a cafe?
That's right, yeah.
How do you think things will change for you?
I'm just super sad about the whole thing, to be honest with you. I think on a ground level, it probably isn't going to change that much immediately. We've had a massive boost to the city with the City of Culture. I mean, we have already seen our coffee prices go up 15%, just the drop of the strength of the pound. So That's...
But what about that argument about sovereignty, about being in control? That didn't hold sway for you?
No, I feel like Europe have been doing a pretty good job for the last, well, all my life. I've never known anything different.
And being British, do you feel British, European, both, neither?
I've always seen myself as European. I've got a European passport. I've travelled extensively in Europe. I think it's really important not to have any borders.
At the back.
I believe that a lot of people ignore the positives that come out of Brussels. So, as a passionate Remainer and environmentalist, I believe that tackling climate change is the most pressing global issue currently. So,
sorry, can I ask you, do you feel European as a young person?
I do feel European, but mostly I feel that we need to be tackling climate change on an international, global level and working together. And this is something that the EU provided the opportunity for. So.
What about that idea of being in control?
We didn't lose sovereignty, we shared it. I mean, some of these people here don't really understand democracy or the concept of sharing. Quite why this UKIP person behind me can't understand that the European Parliament is actually more democratic than our own because it's elected by proportional representation and ours isn't. What proportion of people in the UK voted for a Tory government?
Clapping about falsehoods. Why are you wasting your time on him?
Well, you know all about falsehoods when you put £350 million saying we'd go back into the NHS. That's a falsehood. That's a falsehood. That people vote
saving money by leaving the EU is not a falsehood.
You lied to the electorate about that money going into the NHS.
It's not false to say
you brought up falsehoods.
You save money by leaving the EU.
What about that idea of being in control? What does that actually mean now to your lives?
It means that the people who are making our laws are a little bit closer to us, a little bit more accountable. The more layers of bureaucracy you have, the further up you go.
Who here feels that Westminster
has
listened to you?
How many people can name their MEPs? Because you're in politics. I can name some of my MEPs because I'm interested in politics, but actually, the average person much more likely to name the local councillor, the local MP, than they are MEP because I don't feel connected to them.
Can I just put, sorry sir, can I just put this point to you though? Just 1 second, can I put this point to you? This area was an area that got a lot of money, funding from the EU over the years, hundreds of millions over the years. Is there any sense from any of you that if you say goodbye to the EU, Westminster will pick up the slack, that Westminster will start listening to people who have often told me when I've been up here, nobody's listening to us politically?
I think they'll have to.
Yes.
They'll have to, yeah.
They're already doing it. I mean, Colin, let someone else get a word in edgeways, please. We're already seeing it to some extent from the Northern Powerhouse Minister, Andrew Percy, who is a Hull lad. He's already devoted a hell of a lot of money to the Humber LEP. We've seen that. We've seen money coming to the north.
Lord Haskins, please, tell me, do you think Westminster will be able to pick up the slack? Do you think that the argument I've constantly heard when I've been up here before is people aren't listening to us, Westminster doesn't care? If the EU goes with the EU funding that this area has had, will Westminster pick up the slack?
Well, if the economy is not doing as well as it is at the moment, there'll be less money there at any rate, you know, so that's a problem. I think that there's a general view that, for example, farmers will do badly out of it because the European farming lobby has been strong. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. So I think that the question of support, continued support, is something that depends upon how well the economy is doing and what party's in power.
Sean McAllister, what difference do you think it will make to people in Hull? What changes to the identity? You know, the City of Culture is an amazing celebration. What happens now, as far as you're concerned?
I think the poor will be worse off. I think people like Steve will be worse off. I think the Joseph Rowntree Foundation are going to, was reading a report that they're going to release shortly that shows that the people in the most impoverished areas are the people who voted for this Brexit that are going to be the ones that are going to suffer.
Really briefly, I just want to say, a show of hands if you would, who thinks you'll be better off in 2 years' time? And who worries? I know you wanted to get in. Do you worry about the future?
As a young person, I think we have been greatly underrepresented. And when we talk about sovereignty, we've ignored an entire section of society. I'm a college student myself, and I didn't get to vote in Brexit. And I feel that, you know, Westminster, all these older gentlemen are overbearing over us here tonight as well. and it just shows that we have been ignored, and I think we'll continue to be ignored. I think other young people can agree.
Anyone else on the future? Very briefly.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk about free trade within the European Union and how that's benefited the United Kingdom. The reality is, it's not a free trade bloc, it's a protectionist bloc. Whilst we were in the European Union, we do not have the ability to trade with our Commonwealth partners or any other countries across the globe.
We are going to have to end it there. I'm really, really sorry. What I would say is I'm sure we will be back to talk to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. That is all from us here in Hull, from Matt in Brussels and John in London. That's Channel 4 News. Have a very, very good evening. Thank you very much.